I am Homer, 34 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew what family meant. As an IT consultant in Seattle, I built my success from scratch while watching my parents shower my younger brother Ethan with endless support. But nothing prepared me for discovering they had stolen and sold my inheritance from my grandmother, $11,200 worth of treasured heirlooms, all to fund my brother's lavish wedding. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. Before I share how my own parents stabbed me in the back, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if family betrayal stories make your blood boil, like mine did. Growing up in a quiet Portland suburb, our family appeared normal from the outside. Dad worked as a bank manager, Mom taught third grade, and we lived in a decent 3-bedroom house with a small backyard. But inside those walls, the unspoken hierarchy was crystal clear. My brother Ethan was the golden child, and I was the afterthought. The pattern started when Ethan was born when I was 4. Suddenly, my childhood photos disappeared from the mantle, replaced by endless snapshots of my baby brother. As we grew older, the favoritism only became more obvious and painful. When I was 12, I made the honor roll 3 semesters straight. My report card went on the refrigerator for exactly 2 days before being replaced by Ethan's artwork. A mediocre drawing of our house that my mother praised as showing real artistic talent. Meanwhile, my father barely glanced at my grades, merely nodding and saying, "That is what we expect from you anyway." Baseball season highlighted the disparity even more starkly. Ethan got a brand new Louisville Slugger bat, premium leather glove, and personalized cleats. I received his hand-me-down equipment despite being the one who made the regional team, while Ethan barely made the school squad. When I mentioned this to my father, he frowned and said, "Your brother needs the confidence boost. You are doing fine with what you have." Family vacations were planned exclusively around Ethan's interests. If he wanted to see the Grand Canyon, we drove to Arizona. When I asked if we could visit the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, because I was developing an interest in technology, my mother sighed and said, "Maybe someday, Homer. But this year, we need to focus on what makes everyone happy." By everyone, she clearly meant Ethan. The Christmas I turned 15 brought the point home harder than ever. Ethan received a new gaming console with 6 games, while I got socks and a science book I had already read. When I quietly asked my mother about the disparity later, she patted my shoulder and said, "You are just more practical, honey. Ethan needs more encouragement to succeed." I developed coping mechanisms to deal with being the family afterthought. I poured myself into academics, knowing that education was my ticket to independence. While my parents attended every one of Ethan's average baseball games, they found excuses to miss my debate team finals and science fair competitions. So, I learned to win without an audience, to validate my own achievements, and to stop seeking their approval. My grandmother Eleanor was the exception to this pattern. My father's mother, a retired librarian with a passion for history, saw me clearly when my parents did not. She lived about 30 minutes away, and I started biking to her house every weekend when I was 13 initially, to escape the suffocating favoritism at home. "You have a good mind, Homer," she told me during one of our Saturday afternoon talks. "And more importantly, you have perseverance. Those 2 qualities will take you further than any amount of coddling." Eleanor became my refuge. While my parents fussed over Ethan's B- in English, she celebrated my early acceptance into AP Computer Science. When I won the state mathematics competition, and my parents were too busy at Ethan's band recital to attend the ceremony, Eleanor was there in the front row, beaming with pride. "Your parents are making a mistake," she confided once, when I was 16, after my father had dismissed my summer coding project to praise Ethan's participation trophy in a local swimming competition. "They think Ethan needs more support because he struggles more. But they do not see how their behavior affects you. Someday they might realize it, but do not wait for that day to start building your own life." I took her advice to heart. I applied to colleges far from home, secured a full scholarship to the University of Washington, and left Portland with barely a backward glance. During those college years, I limited my visits home to major holidays, finding excuses to stay on campus during shorter breaks. My parents barely noticed, always busy with whatever crisis or triumph was happening in Ethan's life. While I was double majoring in computer science and business administration, working part-time at the university IT department, and building my first professional connections, Ethan was bouncing between community colleges, unable to commit to a major, or a career path. Yet somehow, this was presented as Ethan finding himself while my focused determination was just Homer being Homer. By the time I graduated with honors, I had already lined up a job with a tech consulting firm in Seattle. I built my career methodically working 80-hour weeks, sometimes taking on the projects no one else wanted, and slowly developing a reputation as the consultant who could solve the unsolvable problems. I moved from company to company, each time increasing my salary and responsibilities. Meanwhile, Ethan finally settled on a marketing degree, funded entirely by our parents, who also provided him with a rent-free place to stay in their basement for 3 years after graduation. When he eventually found a job at a local advertising agency, my parents threw him a celebration dinner. When I was promoted to senior consultant managing a team of 12 people, I received a text message. "Good job. Always knew you would do well." Through it all, my relationship with Eleanor remained my emotional anchor. She never failed to acknowledge my achievements or offered genuine support during setbacks. "You are building something remarkable," she would say during our weekly phone calls. "And you are doing it on your own terms. That takes courage." By my 30th birthday, I had established myself as a successful IT consultant, purchased my own condo in Seattle, and created a life independent of my family's validation. I maintained cordial but distant relationships with my parents, and Ethan calling on birthdays and major holidays, visiting 2 or 3 times a year for brief emotionally muted gatherings. It was not perfect, but it was stable. Until the day Eleanor changed everything with a phone call, a confession, and ultimately a bequest that would later trigger the greatest betrayal of my life. My weekly calls with grandmother Eleanor were sacred. Every Sunday at 10 in the morning, no matter where I was or what project deadline loomed, I would dial her number. Her voice slightly scratchy, but warm, always answered on the second ring. Tell me everything she would say, and unlike my parents, she actually wanted to hear the answer. Our bond deepened as I entered adulthood. With geographical and emotional distance from my parents, I found myself able to share more openly with Eleanor about my feelings regarding family dynamics. "Your father was always rigid in his thinking," she explained, during one particularly honest conversation when I was 30. "Richard sees the world in such black and white terms. When Ethan struggled in school, Richard decided Ethan needed all the support, and you being naturally capable needed none. I tried to talk to him about it many times, but he cannot see past his own framework." Eleanor had her own difficult relationship with my father. She had raised him alone after my grandfather died when my father was just 12. Perhaps overcompensating for the absence of a father figure, she had sent him to military school, which he resented. Their relationship remained formal and somewhat cold throughout his adult life. "Sometimes I wonder if his treatment of you is some reflection of his feelings toward me," she mused once. We often repeat patterns without realizing it. What truly connected Eleanor and me beyond our similar positions in the family hierarchy was our shared appreciation for history and craftsmanship. Eleanor's modest home was a carefully curated collection of beautiful objects with stories. Her pride and joy was her collection of antique pocket watches, each one meticulously maintained, and each with its own provenance. "This one," she said carefully, placing a gold-cased timepiece in my palm during one visit, belonged to a railroad conductor who saved 300 passengers during the Great Blizzard of 1917. He used this very watch to time the emergency repairs to the engine. The company later engraved his name inside the case. She opened it to show me the delicate inscription, teaching me to handle the precious object with reverence. There were 5 such watches in her collection, each worth between $1,000 and $3,000, but priceless in terms of the history they carried. Equally impressive was her collection of rare first-edition books. As a former librarian, she had developed an eye for literary treasures. Her glass-fronted bookcase held several valuable volumes, including a first edition of John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, a signed copy of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, and a rare early printing of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Books and timepieces, she told me, are how humans try to capture the uncapturable time and thought. That is why I treasure them. As I entered my 30s, Eleanor's health began to decline. What started as a bit of trouble with my ticker progressed to a more serious heart condition. I increased my visits, driving the 3 hours from Seattle to Portland every other weekend. During these visits, she began to speak more explicitly about her legacy. "Homer," she said, During one autumn afternoon as we sat in her garden, I have been thinking about what happens to my collection when I am gone. Let us not talk about that, I replied, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. No, it needs to be said, she insisted. Your father has never appreciated these things. To him they are just old junk taking up space, and your mother simply does not care one way or another. You are the only one who understands their value, not just their monetary worth, but their historical significance and the stories they tell. She took my hand, her skin paper thin, but her grip still surprisingly strong. I have made arrangements in my will. The watches and the 3 most valuable books will come to you. I know you will care for them properly. I tried to protest, but she silenced me with a look. It is decided. They belong with someone who will love them as I have. Just after I turned 32, Eleanor's heart condition worsened dramatically. She was hospitalized for 3 weeks, then moved to a hospice facility. I took leave from work and stayed in Portland visiting her daily, reading to her from her favorite books when she was too weak to hold them herself. She passed peacefully in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in April. I was the one who received the call, and I was the one who notified my father. His response was subdued. Practical, I will contact the funeral home. We always knew this was coming. The funeral was small but dignified, just as Eleanor would have wanted. My father remained stoic throughout, my mother appropriately somber, and Ethan seemed mostly uncomfortable, checking his watch repeatedly during the service. 2 weeks later, we gathered in the office of Eleanor's attorney, Maxwell Thornton, for the reading of the will. Mr. Thornton, who had been Eleanor's friend for over 30 years, handled the proceedings with sensitivity. Most of Eleanor's modest estate was divided equally between my father and me, with some small bequests to local charities. Then came the specific items. To my grandson Homer, who alone understands their significance, I leave my collection of 5 antique pocket watches and my 3 rare first edition books, with the hope that he will continue to preserve their histories, and perhaps someday pass them on to someone who shares this appreciation. I felt tears well up, but maintained my composure. My father's expression tightened slightly, but he said nothing. My mother patted his arm, whispering something I could not hear. Ethan merely looked bored. After the reading, as we stood in the parking lot, my father finally spoke about the bequest. Mother always did favor you, he said, not accusingly, but as if stating a simple fact. Those old things never meant anything to me anyway. They are yours now. It was the closest thing to a blessing I was going to get. I carefully packed the watches and books, researching proper storage methods to ensure their preservation. The collection was worth approximately $11,200, according to the insurance appraisal, but to me, they were priceless connections to Eleanor. A few months after the funeral, I faced a temporary housing situation. My condo building needed major structural repairs following a small earthquake, and all residents had to relocate for 6 to 8 weeks. Rather than rent a short-term furnished apartment at Seattle's exorbitant rates, I decided to stay with a colleague who had a spare room. The challenge was what to do with my valuables, particularly Eleanor's collection. My colleague's apartment had limited security, and I did not trust leaving such irreplaceable items there. After considering various options, I reluctantly called my parents. Would it be possible to store a few boxes in your attic for a couple of months? It is Grandma Eleanor's collection, and some other valuable items I do not want to leave vulnerable. My mother answered, Of course, Homer. Family helps family. Bring them over whenever you are ready. I drove to Portland that weekend, carefully carried the 4 secure storage containers up to their attic, and placed them in the driest, most stable corner of the space. These are really important to me, I emphasized to both parents. They are properly insured, but they are irreplaceable in terms of sentimental value. Do not worry, my father assured me. They will be right here waiting when you need them. I had no reason to doubt him. Despite our emotional distance, my parents had always been honest people. I trusted them with Eleanor's legacy, never imagining that this trust would be so catastrophically misplaced. 6 weeks after I stored Eleanor's collection in my parents' attic, I received an enthusiastic call from my mother. Homer, wonderful news. Ethan is engaged. He and Brittany are getting married in 8 months. Isn't that wonderful? Brittany Jensen had been dating my brother for about 2 years. She came from a wealthy family. Her father owned a chain of successful car dealerships across Oregon and worked as an event coordinator for a luxury hotel. She was pleasant enough on the few occasions we had met, though we had little in common. That is great news, I replied with genuine positivity. Whatever my complicated feelings about my family, I did not wish my brother ill. Tell him congratulations from me. You will tell him yourself this weekend, my mother declared. We are having a celebration dinner on Saturday. You need to come. It was not a request, but a command. Despite having plans with friends in Seattle, I found myself driving to Portland. That Saturday afternoon, a bottle of champagne on the passenger seat beside me. The family home buzzed with excitement when I arrived. Brittany's parents, Ronald and Judith Jensen, were already there, making the small living room feel crowded with their outsized personalities. Ronald's booming voice dominated every conversation, while Judith surveyed the modest surroundings with poorly disguised judgment. Here he is, my mother announced as I entered. Our other son, the computer genius from Seattle. I accepted hugs and handshakes, presented the champagne, and congratulated the beaming couple. Ethan seemed genuinely happy, his arm constantly around Brittany's waist. Brittany showed off her impressive diamond ring, which caught the light with every gesture. 3 carats, Ronald announced to no one in particular. Nothing but the best for my little girl. As we sat down to dinner, a catered affair, I noticed, rather than my mother's usual home cooking, the conversation quickly turned to wedding plans. We are thinking the Grand Cascade Hotel, Brittany explained, naming one of Portland's most exclusive venues. They have a 9-month waiting list usually, but since I have connections there, they can fit us in this October. It is perfect, my mother gushed. Just what we always envisioned for Ethan's special day. I noticed my father shifting uncomfortably in his seat, his smile a bit strained. As the discussion moved to floral arrangements and guest lists, that strain became more pronounced. We are thinking 150 guests, Brittany continued. The grand ballroom has that gorgeous crystal chandelier and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Sounds expensive, I commented immediately, receiving a sharp look from my mother. Well, a proper wedding is an investment in their future, Ronald Jensen declared. Of course, traditionally, the bride's family handles most expenses, but we expect everyone to contribute what they can. Right, Richard. My father nodded too quickly. Of course, of course. We want the best for Ethan and Brittany. After dessert, while the women gathered in the living room to look at bridal magazines, and the Jensens stepped outside to take a phone call, my father pulled me into his study. Homer? He began awkwardly. You are doing well in your career. I am getting by, I said, cautiously sensing where this was heading. Better than getting by from what your mother tells me. That new position must pay quite well. I waited, saying nothing. The thing is, he continued staring at the worn carpet. This wedding is going to strain our resources. Your mother and I want to do right by Ethan, but between the rehearsal dinner we are expected to host and our portion of the venue deposit. How much are you asking for, Dad? I cut to the chase. He looked up, relieved and embarrassed simultaneously. 10,000 would make a significant difference. Just a loan, of course. We would pay you back after we refinance the house. I took a deep breath. I cannot do that right now, Dad. I have just committed to a significant investment in my retirement fund, and my building needs major repairs that have stretched my budget thin. His face hardened slightly. I see. Your brother's once-in-a-lifetime event is less important than your retirement planning. That is not fair, I protested. I have my own financial obligations, and $10,000 is a substantial amount. Ethan would do it for you, he said quietly. Would he? We will never know, since he has never been in a position to help me financially, has he? My father's jaw tightened. You always have to bring up the differences between you two. Your brother had different challenges, different needs. And different support, I added. We rejoined the others, the conversation hanging unresolved between us. Throughout the remainder of the evening, I caught my parents exchanging meaningful glances. My mother was especially cool toward me, her responses clipped when I spoke. As I prepared to leave, Ethan cornered me by the front door. So I hear you are not willing to help with the wedding, he said, his tone casual, but his eyes hard. That is between Dad and me, I replied. Come on, Homer. You are the one with the fancy job and the downtown condo. Would it kill you to help out the family for once? For once, I echoed incredulously. I have been financially independent since college. Can you say the same? Ethan's face flushed. Not everyone has your natural advantages. Some of us had to work harder for everything. I nearly laughed at the irony, but managed to maintain my composure. I am sorry, but the answer is still no. I wish you and Brittany all the happiness in the world, but I cannot finance your wedding. In the weeks that followed, the tension escalated through text messages and phone calls. My mother began sending me photos of wedding venues and catering options with captions like "What Ethan deserves" and "Helping family is priceless." During one particularly uncomfortable phone call, she said something that should have alerted me, but did not register fully at the time. "Do not worry about the money situation," she said, with unusual brightness. "Your father and I have found a solution. We would never want to burden you with family responsibilities." Her tone was so pointed that I almost asked what she meant, but I was distracted by a major work crisis. A client's entire network had gone down, and I was coordinating the emergency response. I simply said I was glad they had worked things out and ended the call. Looking back, that was the moment I should have questioned everything. But I was juggling 60-hour work weeks and the stress of being displaced from my home. The last thing on my mind was what exactly my parents meant by finding a solution to their financial shortfall. I would discover their solution soon enough, and it would shatter whatever remaining trust existed between us. 8 weeks after relocating my condo building's repairs were finally complete. I moved back in on a Friday, spending the weekend organizing my belongings and settling back into my space. On Sunday evening, I called my parents. "Now that I am back in my condo, I will drive down next weekend to pick up Grandma Eleanor's collection and my other stored items," I told my mother. There was a pause, just a beat too long, before she responded. "Oh, next weekend is not good. Your father and I are. We have plans with the Hendersons all weekend." "That is fine," I said easily. "I do not need you to be there. I still have the spare key you gave me. I can just get the boxes from the attic and be on my way." Another pause, longer this time. "Let me talk to your father and call you back," she said abruptly, then hung up. She did not call back that evening, or the next day. By Tuesday afternoon, I had called 3 times, leaving increasingly concerned messages. Finally, my father returned my call. "Homer," he said, his voice unusually formal. "About those items in the attic. We should discuss this in person. Can you come down this weekend after all?" "Dad, what is going on? Are my things okay?" Alarm bells were now ringing loudly in my head. "Just come down Saturday. We will talk then." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I could not wait until Saturday. Taking a personal day from work, I drove to Portland on Wednesday, a knot of dread growing in my stomach with every mile. I arrived unannounced at 2 in the afternoon, finding both my parents' cars in the driveway. My mother answered the door, her face falling when she saw me. "Homer, we were not expecting you until Saturday. I need to check on my stored items," I said, already moving past her toward the stairs. "Something does not feel right about all this." "Wait, let me get your father," she called, but I was already halfway up the stairs to the attic. The pull-down attic ladder was stiff, as always. I climbed up and switched on the bare bulb that illuminated the dusty space. Moving to the far corner, where I had carefully placed my storage containers, I found nothing. The corner was empty. Not just empty of my containers, but suspiciously clean compared to the surrounding areas, as if someone had recently removed items and cleaned up evidence of their presence. I heard my father's heavy tread on the ladder behind me. "Homer," he began. I turned to face him, fury and fear competing for dominance. "Where are they? Where are Grandma's watches and books?" He did not immediately answer, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Dad," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Where is my property?" "Let us go downstairs and discuss this reasonably," he suggested, already backing down the ladder. In the living room, my mother sat perched on the edge of the sofa, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit she had for as long as I could remember. My father took the armchair across from her, leaving me standing between them. "We had an unexpected financial situation," my father began stiffly. "Where are Grandma Eleanor's watches and books?" I repeated. My mother's eyes welled with tears. "We had no choice, Homer. The wedding venue needed a deposit, and the rehearsal dinner location was going to give our slot away, And then Ethan needed help with the ring payments. The blood drained from my face as her meaning became clear. You sold my things. My voice was barely a whisper. Not sold, my father corrected quickly. More like, liquidated temporarily. We plan to buy them back, of course. You sold my inherited property, without my knowledge or permission. I was now shouting. Those were Grandma's. She wanted me to have them. And you would have just left them gathering dust in storage anyway. My father countered, his own voice rising defensively. They were sitting in our attic, while Ethan had a real need. So you stole from me to give to Ethan. Again. The bitter taste of decades of favoritism crystallized in that moment. It was not stealing, my mother protested weakly. It was borrowing. Family helps family, Homer. How much, I demanded. How much did you get for my property? They exchanged a glance. 11,200, my father finally admitted. The collector said that was fair market value. Exactly the amount on the insurance appraisal. They had been thorough in their betrayal, I had to give them that. Who? Who did you sell them to? A private collector in Lake Oswego. Gregory Phillips. He specializes in antique timepieces and rare books. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? My mother asked nervously. Calling the police to report a theft. My father stood up abruptly. You would call the police on your own parents. You stole $11,200 worth of my legally inherited property. What would you call it? I would call it family. Taking care of family, he said, his face reddening. Ethan needed that money for his future. The watches and books were just sitting there doing nothing. They were mine, I roared. Not yours to take, not yours to sell, not yours to decide their purpose? The front door opened, and Ethan walked in freezing when he saw the three of us in what was clearly a confrontation. What is going on? He asked. Your parents stole Grandma Eleanor's collection and sold it to pay for your wedding, I told him bluntly. Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to defiance. You refused to help, he said, as if that justified everything. What were they supposed to do? Let me have a substandard wedding when you are sitting on valuable stuff you do not even display or use. It was my property. My inheritance. It is always about you, is it not? Ethan shot back. Your achievements, your career, your inheritance. God forbid you share anything with your family. Share. They did not ask me to share. They took without asking. They stole from me. Family cannot steal from family, my mother interjected tearfully. We are all one unit. I stared at her incredulously. Is that what you told yourselves to justify this? That my property was actually family property all along? You are blowing this out of proportion, my father said. We were going to tell you after the wedding, once we had a plan to replace the items. With what money? I demanded. You just said you needed the money for wedding expenses. Were you planning to win the lottery to pay me back? No one answered. The money is spent, is it not? The venue deposit, the rehearsal dinner, the ring payments, it is all gone. My mother nodded miserably. I took a deep breath, trying to control the rage, and hurt threatening to overwhelm me. Here is what is going to happen. I am going to find this Gregory Phillips. I am going to try to buy back Grandma's collection. And then I am going to make sure none of you ever have the opportunity to betray me again. What does that mean? My father asked. It means we are done. All of us. I have spent my entire life accepting that Ethan was the priority, that my needs and feelings would always come second. But this crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. You would cut off your family over some old junk? Ethan asked incredulously. I am cutting off people who have proven they cannot be trusted. People who would steal from me without remorse. That you do not even see what you did wrong tells me everything I need to know. I walked to the door, then turned back for one final statement. You are right about one thing. Family cannot steal from family. But that is because real family would never consider taking what belongs to someone they love. So congratulations, you have just proven we are not family at all. I walked out, ignoring my mother's sobs and my father's demands to come back and discuss this reasonably. There was nothing reasonable about what they had done, and no discussion would change that fact. Driving back to Seattle, I alternated between rage and a deep, hollow grief. The people who were supposed to love and protect me had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. And worse, they had done it for the same reason they had always marginalized my needs and feelings, because Ethan came first. Always. The 3-hour drive back to Seattle was a blur of rage and grief. I barely remembered arriving at my condo, mechanically parking in my assigned spot, and riding the elevator to my floor. Once inside, I collapsed onto my sofa, physically and emotionally drained. Sleep evaded me that night. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from my parents and Ethan, which I ignored. Around 3 in the morning, I finally forced myself to analyze the situation rationally, the way I would approach a complex problem at work. Facts. My parents had stolen property worth $11,200. They had sold it to a collector named Gregory Phillips in Lake Oswego. The money was gone, spent on Ethan's wedding expenses. And most importantly, they did not believe they had done anything truly wrong. That last point was what hurt the most. In their minds, taking my inheritance was justified because it served Ethan's needs. The lifetime pattern of prioritizing him had culminated in this ultimate betrayal, and they expected me to simply accept it as I had accepted every other instance of favoritism. By morning, exhaustion had given way to cold determination. I called Brandon Willis, a lawyer friend who had helped me with contract negotiations in the past. They did what Brandon exclaimed after I explained the situation. Homer, that is straight up theft. It does not matter that they are your parents or that the items were stored in their house. The inheritance was legally yours. What are my options? I asked. Well, you could file a police report for theft. That would potentially lead to criminal charges against your parents. You could also file a civil lawsuit to recover the value of the stolen property. Given that they have basically admitted to taking and selling the items without permission, it is a pretty clear-cut case. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. I do not want to send my parents to jail, as angry as I am. I just want Grandma's collection back. Then your best bet is to track down this collector and try to buy the items back, Brandon advised. But I would still document everything. Get statements in writing if possible, save any texts or emails where they admit to taking the items. And I would definitely file a police report, even if you do not press charges immediately. It establishes the timeline and facts of the theft. After ending the call with Brandon, I began researching Gregory Phillips. It did not take long to find him. He owned a high-end antique shop in Lake Oswego called Timeless Treasures that specialized in rare books and antique timepieces. His website featured an impressive collection and mentioned his reputation as one of the foremost experts on vintage pocket watches in the Pacific Northwest. I called the shop and was told by an assistant that Mr. Phillips was traveling but would return the following week. I left my contact information and a brief message about wanting to discuss recently acquired items from the Warren family, my parents' last name. Next, I documented everything I could remember about the confrontation with my parents, writing down their admissions and explanations while they were still fresh in my mind. I backed up the increasingly desperate text messages they were sending, all of which contained tacit acknowledgments of what they had done. We were going to replace everything after the wedding. You need to understand we had no choice. Family property stays in the family anyway. Each message only confirmed their guilt and their fundamental misunderstanding of why their actions were so devastating. Over the next few days, I formulated a 3-part plan. First, I would pursue legal consequences. Not to be vindictive, but to establish officially that what they did was wrong and illegal. This meant filing a police report and preparing for a potential civil lawsuit. Second, I would attempt to recover Grandma Eleanor's legacy by contacting Gregory Phillips and offering to buy back the collection, even if it meant paying more than what he had paid my parents. Third, I would ensure that my family's actions were exposed to their social circle, not out of revenge, but because their behavior should have consequences beyond just my cutting ties with them. People should know what they were capable of doing to their own son. The hardest part was accepting that our relationship was truly broken. Despite years of favoritism and emotional distance, I had never completely given up hope that someday they might see me clearly and value me equally. That hope died the moment I discovered the empty corner in their attic. A week after my confrontation with my parents, I drove to the Lake Oswego police station and filed a formal report about the theft. The officer taking my statement, a middle-aged man named Marcus Jenkins, listened attentively as I explained the situation. "Let me make sure I understand," Officer Jenkins said. Your parents took inherited items you were temporarily storing in their home, sold them without your knowledge or permission, and used the money to pay for your brother's wedding expenses. That is correct, I confirmed. And they have admitted to doing this. Yes, both verbally during our confrontation and in subsequent text messages. Officer Jenkins shook his head slightly. Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing more often than you might think. Family members thinking they have rights to property that is not theirs. Do you want to press charges? I hesitated. I want the report on file for now. I am trying to recover the items directly from the buyer first. Understood. We will investigate and contact you about next steps. Just be aware that family cases can get complicated quickly. After filing the police report, I reached out to my close friends for support. Unlike family relationships, which had always been complicated for me, my friendships were solid and nurturing. My college roommate Marcus, now a software developer at Microsoft, invited me over for dinner with his family. My colleague Jennifer listened patiently over lunch as I processed my feelings. My neighbor Derek suggested boxing classes to channel my anger productively. It was Derek who asked the most insightful question. What do you actually want out of this Homer punishment reconciliation? Just your grandmother's stuff back. I considered his question carefully. I want acknowledgement. I want them to truly understand and admit what they did was wrong, not just legally, but morally. I want them to recognize the pattern of always putting Ethan first, even at my expense. And yes, I want Grandma's collection back because it connects me to the one family member who actually saw and valued me. And if they never acknowledge any of that, Derek pressed, then I need to accept that and move forward without them in my life. I replied the words painful but necessary. 2 weeks after my initial call to Timeless Treasures, I received a call from Gregory Phillips himself. His voice was cultured and precise, exactly what I would expect from a high-end antique dealer. Mr. Warren, I understand you were inquiring about some items I recently acquired from Richard and Martha Warren. Yes, Mr. Phillips? Those items, 5 antique pocket watches and 3 rare first edition books, were actually my legal property. They were left to me by my grandmother, Eleanor Warren, and were being temporarily stored at my parents' home. They sold them without my knowledge or consent. There was a pause on the line. I see he finally said, his tone more reserved. That is, concerning. Your parents presented themselves as the legal owners. I have documentation proving they were part of my inheritance. I assured him the will, the insurance appraisal, everything. This puts me in an awkward position, Mr. Warren. I purchased these items in good faith. I understand that, and I do not blame you at all. I would like to buy them back from you. I am willing to pay more than what you paid my parents if necessary. Another pause. That is a generous offer, but these items have already been cataloged and some have been listed for sale. The Whitman First Edition has already attracted significant interest. My heart sank. Please, Mr. Phillips. These items have enormous sentimental value to me. They are my connection to my grandmother, who was very important in my life. Why do not we meet in person to discuss this? He suggested. I will be in my shop all day tomorrow, if you can make the trip to Lake Oswego. I agreed immediately, already planning to take another day off work. This was more important than any client meeting. That night, I received a series of increasingly frantic texts from Ethan. The police came to Mom and Dad's house today. Are you insane? You filed a police report against our parents over some old junk. You need to fix this now. Mom is completely devastated. I did not respond to any of them. My parents had made their choice, and now they were facing the consequences. The time for trying to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself was over. The next day, I drove to Lake Oswego with a sense of purpose. Whatever happened with my family, I was determined to recover Eleanor's legacy. It was no longer just about the monetary value or even the sentimental connection. It was about refusing to let my parents erase the one person who had truly valued me for who I was. Timeless Treasures occupied a prime corner location in Lake Oswego's upscale shopping district. The storefront featured elegant window displays of antique clocks and glass cases containing what appeared to be rare manuscripts. A small brass bell chimed softly as I pushed open the heavy wooden door. The interior was exactly what you would expect from a high-end, antique shop: warm wood paneling, subtle lighting, highlighting select display cases, and the faint smell of lemon polish and old paper. A young woman at the counter looked up as I entered. "Welcome to Timeless Treasures. How may I help you?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Phillips." "Homer Warren." Her expression changed slightly, just a flicker of recognition. "Of course. Mr. Phillips is expecting you. Please follow me." She led me through the main showroom to a door at the back, knocked once, and opened it after a muffled "dot come in" from the other side. Gregory Phillips rose from behind an antique desk as I entered. He was a tall, thin man in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked every inch the distinguished antique dealer in his tweed jacket and bow tie. "Mr. Warren, thank you for coming," he said, extending his hand. "Please have a seat." I sat in the leather chair opposite his desk, noticing immediately the familiar shape of one of Eleanor's pocket watches sitting on a velvet pad between us. My heart constricted at the sight. I have been reviewing the situation since our call. Phillips began folding his hands on the desk. I must say, in 30 years of dealing in antiques, I have encountered family disputes over inherited items before, but rarely one so clear-cut. "What do you mean?" "Your parents were quite explicit when selling these items to me. They stated they were helping their son, their other son, as they put it, with wedding expenses. They mentioned the items had been left to you by your grandmother, but suggested there was a family agreement to liquidate them for this purpose." I felt a fresh wave of anger. There was no agreement. I had no idea they had even taken the items, until I went to retrieve them. Phillips nodded gravely. "So I gather. The police detective who contacted me yesterday was quite thorough. Officer Jenkins had moved quickly." I felt a surge of appreciation for his efficiency. "Have you had a chance to consider my offer to buy back the collection?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. "I have indeed," Phillips replied. "And normally I would say that once items are purchased legitimately, they become part of my inventory to sell at market rates. However, this situation has unusual aspects." He picked up the pocket watch from the velvet pad, turning it carefully in his hands. "This railroad conductor's watch, the craftsmanship is remarkable. And the provenance, the story behind it, that adds immeasurable value. Your grandmother clearly understood that. When I purchased these items, your parents could tell me nothing about their history. They were just merchandise to them." He set the watch down and looked at me directly. "You said on the phone that these items have sentimental value to you. Tell me about your grandmother." I had not expected this question, but I found myself talking about Eleanor, her wisdom, her quiet strength, how she had been the one person in my family who truly saw and valued me. I explained how she had taught me about the stories behind each watch and book, how we had spent hours discussing history and craftsmanship and the importance of preserving the past. When I finished, Phillips was silent for a moment. "Mr. Warren I became an antique dealer because I believe objects with history should be respected and preserved by people who understand their value. It seems to me that your grandmother entrusted these items to you for precisely that reason." He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a folder. "I purchased the collection from your parents for $11,200. I would be willing to sell it back to you for the same amount. No markup, no dealer's premium, just what I paid." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Mr. Phillips. That is incredibly generous." "It is not generosity," he corrected mildly. "It is respect for your grandmother's wishes and recognition that these items belong with someone who truly appreciates them." We spent the next hour completing the paperwork for the transaction. I provided proof of the wire transfer from my account to his, and he carefully packed each watch and book in protective materials, explaining the proper storage requirements as he worked. As I was preparing to leave with my recovered treasures, the shop's doorbell chimed. Phillips glanced toward the main showroom, then frowned slightly. "It seems your brother has arrived," he said quietly. I stepped into the showroom to find Ethan standing by the counter, his face flushed with anger. He spotted me immediately. "I knew I would find you here," he spat. "You just could not let it go, could you?" "How did you know I would be here?" I asked, clutching the package containing Eleanor's collection. "Mom and Dad told me everything. About the police report about you trying to buy back Grandma's stuff. Do you have any idea what you have done?" There are police officers questioning our parents like they are criminals. They are criminals, Ethan. They stole from me. It is family property. No, it was my inheritance legally left to me by Grandma Eleanor. Not yours, not Mom and Dad's, mine. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You have always been so selfish. So focused on what you deserve, what you are entitled to. Meanwhile, I was trying to create a beautiful wedding for Brittany to start our life together properly. At my expense. Without even asking me. Would you have said yes, if we had asked? Would you have helped your brother have the wedding he deserves? We will never know. Will we? Because instead of asking, you all decided stealing from me was the appropriate solution. Our increasingly heated exchange was interrupted by the shop door opening again. Brittany walked in, her expression shifting from confusion to shock as she took in the scene. Ethan, what is going on? Why did you rush out of the restaurant like that? Ethan turned to her, his anger momentarily replaced by embarrassment. It is nothing, Britt. Just some family business with Homer. It is not nothing, I countered, turning to Brittany. Did you know that the deposit for your wedding venue was paid with money from selling items stolen from me? Items that my grandmother left specifically to me in her will? Brittany's eyes widened. What, no, I thought. She looked at Ethan. You told me your parents were helping with the deposit. You never said anything about selling Homer's things. It was not like that, Ethan protested. They were just sitting in the attic gathering dust. And Homer refused to help us when we asked for a loan. So you stole from him instead? Brittany's voice rose in disbelief. We did not steal, Ethan began. Yes, you did, I interrupted firmly. Mom and Dad took my legal property without permission and sold it for $11,200, which they gave to you for wedding expenses. That is theft, Ethan, plain and simple. Brittany took a step back, her expression horrified. Is this true? Our venue deposit, the rehearsal dinner reservation. It was all paid for with stolen money. Ethan's silence was answer enough. I cannot believe this, Brittany said, shaking her head. My parents raised me to believe that integrity matters above all else. What will they think when they find out our wedding was being funded this way? Brittany, please, Ethan pleaded. It was a misunderstanding, a family matter. A misunderstanding, I echoed incredulously. They admitted taking my things and selling them without permission. There was no misunderstanding. Brittany looked between us, then focused on me. Homer, I am so sorry. I had no idea. None at all. Her sincerity was obvious, and I nodded acknowledgement. I believe you. She turned back to Ethan, her expression hardening. We need to talk. Privately. Now. As they left the shop, I heard her say, The wedding is officially on hold until I figure out if I even want to be part of this family. Gregory Phillips, who had been standing discreetly by the counter during the entire exchange, approached me after they left. Family disputes over inheritances can reveal a great deal about character, he observed quietly. Yes, I agreed, feeling oddly calm after the confrontation. They certainly can. I left Timeless Treasures with Eleanor's collection securely packed, and a sense that while the road ahead might be difficult, I was finally standing firmly on the side of truth. My parents and Ethan had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences, not because I sought revenge, but because actions have natural repercussions. The police investigation continued over the next few weeks. Officer Jenkins called regularly with updates, and I provided all the documentation and text messages that proved my case. My parents hired a lawyer, which only confirmed they knew they had done something legally wrong despite their protestations to the contrary. Meanwhile, I drafted a carefully worded email to my extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, explaining exactly what had happened. I did not embellish or exaggerate. The plain facts were damning enough. I included screenshots of my parents' text messages acknowledging they had taken and sold my inheritance. The response was overwhelming. My father's brother, Uncle Philip, called me immediately. I always knew Richard favored Ethan, he said, but I never imagined he would go this far. Your grandmother would be horrified. My mother's sister, Aunt Deborah, sent a lengthy email expressing her shock and disappointment. Martha was raised better than this, she wrote. I cannot understand how she could participate in stealing from her own son. Even my cousin Jennifer, who had always been close to Ethan, reached out to offer support. What they did was wrong on every level, she told me during a long phone call. No one in the family is defending them, Homer. Not even those who usually take their side. The exposure of their actions to the family had the effect I had anticipated. My parents' carefully cultivated image as devoted, fair parents was crumbling under the weight of truth. It was not revenge I sought, but accountability. For once, they could not spin a narrative that painted Ethan as deserving and me as selfish. In the midst of this family upheaval, I received a text message from Brittany asking to meet for coffee. Curious about her perspective, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between Seattle and Portland. Brittany looked tired, but determined as she stirred her latte. I wanted you to know that I have postponed the wedding indefinitely, she said without preamble. I cannot marry into a family with these kinds of values. I am sorry, I said, and meant it. Whatever my issues with Ethan, I had not wanted to destroy his relationship. Do not be, she replied firmly. This revealed something important about Ethan and his parents before I legally tied myself to them. If they could justify stealing from you, what else would they justify in the future? She took a sip of her coffee before continuing. My father always taught me that character is revealed in how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Your parents and Ethan failed that test spectacularly. We talked for nearly 2 hours. By the end, I had a newfound respect for Brittany and her moral clarity. Whether she and Ethan eventually worked things out or not, she had drawn a clear line about what behavior she would accept in her life. As I drove back to Seattle that evening, I reflected on how this painful episode had revealed not just the worst in my immediate family, but the best in others. Gregory Phillips's respect for my grandmother's wishes. Officer Jenkins's commitment to justice, regardless of family ties. My extended family's support for truth over blood loyalty, and Brittany's unwavering moral compass. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt something close to peace. Not because everything was resolved, but because I had finally stopped accepting the unacceptable. I had drawn my own line, and in doing so, discovered I was not as alone as I had always believed. The legal proceedings moved forward with methodical inevitability. 3 months after filing the police report, I sat in a courtroom watching my parents enter with their attorney. They looked smaller, somehow diminished by the gravity of the situation. My mother kept glancing at me, her expression a mixture of pleading and resentment. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw set in the stubborn expression I had known all my life. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Honorable Patricia Winters, reviewed the facts of the case with clinical precision. The evidence clearly indicates that Richard and Martha Warren removed property legally belonging to Homer Warren without permission, sold said property, and used the proceeds for purposes unrelated to the plaintiff. The defendants have not disputed these basic facts. My parents' lawyer attempted to argue that there had been a family understanding about the use of the inherited items, but text messages and testimony from Gregory Phillips undermined this claim. The judge was unmoved. Intent does not negate action, she stated firmly. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendants are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $11,200 plus an additional $3,000 for legal fees and damages. This judgment is to be paid within 90 days. It was a complete legal victory, but I felt no triumph as the gavel fell. Only a hollow confirmation of what I had already known: my parents had wronged me, and no court ruling could heal the deeper breach of trust. Outside the courthouse, my parents approached me, my father looking defeated, and my mother tearful. "Are you satisfied now?" my father asked, his voice tired rather than angry. "You have humiliated us in front of the entire family and community." "I did not humiliate you," I replied calmly. "Your actions did that. I simply refused to pretend what you did was acceptable." "We will have to take out a second mortgage to pay this judgment," he continued. "Is that what you wanted? To financially strain your parents in their retirement years?" "What I wanted was for you to respect my property and my feelings. What I wanted was to be treated as equally valuable as Ethan. What I wanted was parents who would never consider stealing from one child to benefit another. But I have accepted I will never have those things." My mother stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "Homer, please. We made a terrible mistake. We see that now. Can we not find a way forward as a family?" I gently moved back from her touch. "A mistake is accidental. What you did was deliberate. You took my things, sold them, and spent the money, all while knowing exactly what you were doing. And you only regret it now because there are consequences. That is not fair, she protested. We love you. We have always loved you. Perhaps in your way you have, I acknowledged. But love without respect is not enough. Love that always prioritizes one child over another is not enough. I turned to leave, then paused. I will waive the $3,000 in damages if you use the money to get family counseling. Not for my sake, I do not expect to be part of that process, but for yours and Ethan's. There are patterns here that go beyond this one incident, and they need addressing if you want healthy relationships going forward. Without waiting for their response, I walked away. It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was the closest I could come at that moment, recognizing their humanity while maintaining the boundaries necessary for my own well-being. In the weeks that followed, I focused on creating a proper home for Eleanor's recovered collection. I commissioned a custom display cabinet with museum-quality glass and proper environmental controls for the books. Each pocket watch was professionally cleaned and placed on individual stands with cards describing their historical significance. The railroad conductor's watch took the central position, its gold case catching the light just as it had in Eleanor's home. Brandon, who had supported me throughout the legal process, visited my condo to see the completed display. It is beautiful, he said, examining the watches appreciatively. Your grandmother would be proud. Not just of the display, I replied, but of me finally standing up for myself. Yes, he agreed. Probably that most of all. The process of emotional healing was less straightforward than the legal resolution. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in family trauma. Our weekly sessions helped me untangle the complex web of emotions surrounding not just the theft, but the lifetime of favoritism that had preceded it. What your parents did was a dramatic escalation of an existing pattern Dr. Chen observed during one session. They had always prioritized Ethan's needs above yours, but this crossed into criminal behavior. That escalation forced you to confront the reality of the relationship in a way you had previously been able to avoid. I always knew I was second place, I admitted. I just did not want to believe they would actually steal from me. The theft was clarifying, she suggested. It made the pattern undeniable. Yes, I agreed. And in a strange way, that clarity has been freeing. There is no more hoping they will change or suddenly see me differently. I can accept the reality and move forward. Moving forward meant redefining family on my own terms. I deepened my connections with friends who had supported me and reached out to extended family members who had shown understanding. I began regular dinner gatherings at my condo, creating new traditions with people who valued me for exactly who I was. It also meant setting firm boundaries with my parents. When they repaid the court-ordered restitution, having indeed taken out a second mortgage to do so, they included a letter asking to rebuild our relationship. I responded with clear conditions, acknowledgement of the pattern of favoritism, commitment to ongoing counseling, and acceptance that trust would have to be rebuilt gradually over time, if at all. Their initial response was defensive, but 3 months later, I received a letter that showed the first signs of genuine reflection. My father wrote, I have been thinking about what you said regarding patterns in our family. At first, I wanted to dismiss it as your perception rather than reality. But our counselor asked us to list the major events and decisions in both your life and Ethan's and how we responded to each. Looking at that list was uncomfortable. There was a clear imbalance I had never allowed myself to see. I cannot change the past, but I am trying to understand how we got here. It was not a complete acknowledgement, but it was a start. I responded with cautious appreciation for his reflection while maintaining my boundaries. Ethan and I remained estranged for nearly a year. Then, unexpectedly, he called me on my birthday. I have been doing a lot of thinking, he said awkwardly after I answered. About everything that happened. About our whole lives, really. And, I prompted, when he fell silent. And I have been blind to my own privilege in the family. Brittany helped me see it. She refused to move forward with our relationship until I really understood what had happened and my part in it. Are you two back together then? I asked. We are working on it, he said. The wedding is still on hold, but we are in counseling together. She says she needs to see real change before making that commitment. She sounds wise, I commented. She is, he agreed. Wiser than I deserved. He paused again. I owe you an apology, Homer, not just for the theft, but for a lifetime of accepting preferential treatment at your expense. I never questioned it, because it benefited me and that was wrong. The apology was unexpected and seemed genuine. We talked for nearly an hour more honestly than we ever had before. I did not promise immediate reconciliation, but I left the door open for continued conversation. Slowly, cautiously, connections began to rebuild. Not the same connections as before, those were irreparably altered, but new ones, based on clearer understanding and stricter boundaries. My parents attended counseling regularly. Ethan and Brittany eventually rescheduled their wedding, a much smaller affair that they paid for themselves. I attended, but maintained a certain emotional distance. 2 years after the theft, I invited my immediate family to my condo for the first time. I watched carefully as they entered, noting their reactions to the prominent display of Eleanor's collection. It is exactly how she would have wanted it, my mother said, softly touching the edge of the cabinet without opening it. She always said you were the only one who truly understood the value of these things. Not just their monetary value, my father added, studying the pocket watches, their history, their craftsmanship, their stories. I completed. That is what Grandma taught me to appreciate. Every object has a story, and those stories deserve to be preserved and respected. Like family stories, Ethan suggested meeting my eyes with new understanding. Yes, I agreed. Even the difficult ones. Maybe especially those. That evening did not erase the past, but it created a space for a different kind of future, one in which painful truths could be acknowledged rather than buried, and boundaries could be respected rather than violated. In the years since, I have come to understand that family is not a fixed entity, but a living relationship that must be nurtured with honesty and respect. Sometimes that means drawing hard lines. Sometimes it means offering pathways to redemption. Always it means honoring your own worth enough to demand treatment that reflects it. Eleanor's collection remains my most treasured possession, not just for its monetary or historical value, but for what it represents: the legacy of the one person who saw me clearly from the beginning, and my own journey to finally seeing myself with that same clarity. I no longer define myself as the less favored child, or measure my worth against my brothers. Instead, I have learned that true family, whether born or chosen, is built on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and the courage to uphold both. It is a lesson I wish I had not needed to learn through such painful means, but one I will never forget. Have you ever had to cut off family members who betrayed your trust? What boundaries did you need to set to protect yourself? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself, even when it means standing alone. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we create through boundaries and self-respect is stronger than the one we were born into.